Stinky stratas, people wanting to buy in a strata and are really worried about the building. Is it that bad? Is it that dangerous? Stay tuned. We're going to talk about it right now.
Morning, Mark. Episode, see what I did there? 595.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, 595. Yeah, I thought so. It's only taken 595 times to do that, but that's okay. Strata Blocks, how are you, Mr. Novak, this morning, first of all?
Excellent, buddy. Excellent. You?
Very well. We were just having a bit of a conversation about strata units across the beaches, whether it's a good or bad investment, and there's a whole rabbit hole you can go down. But particularly when talking about when there are issues with strata, excuse me, my husky voice, is strata typically something to be concerned about, Mark, or is it just the norm that if you want to buy a unit, you have to get on board with?
It's all over the media the last couple of years, and people have. It's changed. Buildings are getting older. Strata living is a lot bigger than it ever was. People traditionally only bought houses in the 50s and 60s, and as we're getting more metro, people are looking at strata a lot more. Because the building's getting older, stuff's going wrong with them, and because some builders are cutting corners, people are worried about them. Naturally, some of the stuff you see in the media is really spooking people. You're not hearing, and what I am saying to people is, if you consider how many unit blocks are built in Sydney in a year, of course you're going to have, a couple of bad ones, but all you hear about are the bad ones. So it's quite spooky.
Yeah, well, you hear stories about what happened at Opal Towers, and I think that is what sticks in your mind. If you're not an investor with units, or if you're not an owner-occupier living in a block, you see that and you think that's one worst-case scenario. But it really isn't as bad as that. Your strata is there to protect you as an owner, to protect all the owners within the building, and for the most part, it's nothing but beneficial. But in the case of when you're buying into a strata block, what steps might you take to have a look and assess the situation around the strata and how it's being run, and what works need to be done, money, etc.?
Believe it or not, one of the first things I do, guys, if I was looking at a strata building and worry about the integrity of the building, is I talk to the neighbours. And the neighbours generally don't care, and they're not vested in the deal. So if you're going to ask the owner's always going to paint a rosy picture, but quite the opposite with neighbours. They'll just give it to you straight up. It's always like knocking on a door after 5:30 and having a good old-fashioned chat with people and seeing, what really is the bottom line of the building.
Luke this morning has just said assesses communication with the executive committee, and also buy. Look, I think strata, I've never owned building defects. Strata's there to protect you and everyone else in the block. You all pay your quarterly levies. It's down to the maintenance and upkeep of the building. Every building's different. There are ones that do have defects that get fixed. There are ones that things happen to over time. You said a moment ago that there are not very many buildings that are past the point of no return. And I think a lot of people assume that there's an issue, it's as bad as it can be. But we sort of, again, have the conversation. Are we just talking about things that only we understand? But most people wouldn't really have a general idea as to how to look at these things, Mark, would they? Strata is underrated.
Yeah, look, it's out of people's... It's out of people's scope to understand what it's going to take to get it repaired, and we are often selling, like, the things that are going wrong even with the older buildings these days is concrete cancer, concrete spalling, and things going wrong with older, big, strong, good buildings is fire upgrades, window locks. these are huge costs for a prospective purchaser, but they're part of business. They're part of stratas. And James, I think it should be also noted, we were having a chat about it can be, you can turn it to an advantage, because if you do understand what's happening in the building and why there's more costs coming up, and most buyers can't understand, you can turn that to your advantage. So if someone hears and their ears prick up that there's a 10, 20,000 levy per unit, most people would go, too hard, I'm going to buy something else. Some people may say, man, it's only a fire upgrade. Once that fire upgrade's done, we're good. And what's the worst case scenario that fire upgrade's going to cost? It looks like me, after looking at the minutes of the meetings, it's going to cost 10. I'll try to chisel the owner out for 20, and everyone's a winner.
Yep. And also, and you're right, when there are issues, and the agent probably isn't going to be telling each person individually what's wrong with the building. When there's interest shown, you divulge into those details a little bit further. But the buyers can very quickly get scared away from it when you mention there's any issue with strata whatsoever, big or small. And then all of a sudden, as you said a moment ago, that pool of buyers can really decrease. And someone savvy who looks around it and says, this is an opportunity, you can pick up a steal for that as well. So sometimes those ones that have a little bit of work that needs to be done, if you've got the sort of sharp wit on your side, you can probably turn that negative into a very big positive very quickly.
Knowledge is the big thing. I think if you've got the knowledge, you've got the understanding, you've got the information to process, you've got professionals that can give you that advice, then, man, I think you're good.
Yeah, knowledge is power.
Yep.
Anything else you would like to mention on the note of strata blocks this morning, Mark? It's one of those things that it's probably a bit of a rabbit hole. People have probably all had different experiences in their own lives with strata blocks, but for the most part, it's something that we have to get used to. There's not more space being created anywhere. The Northern Beaches is one of the places that we're quite lucky that there's not a whole lot of new building and new projects going on, but there are still another 10 or 12,000 apartments that are due to be built in the next 10 or so years across the beaches. They're not 10,000 new homes, they're 10,000 apartments, meaning more strata, people need to be more comfortable, more familiar. Any tips, tricks, hacks?
I think the biggest thing out of today is don't let it spoil the broth. So, when you hear of these couple of bad buildings, just bear in mind there are thousands of buildings being built, and you have heard of one or two, and there are thousands being built every year in New South Wales. So I think just be really conscious that, to get into the right building, I think that buying in a bad unit block, if commercially your pockets are being lined better off, then it is worth it. If commercially your pockets are going to get absolutely hammered and you're going to lose money on the deal, and when you bought it, you didn't make that consideration, that's a bad deal. But you can turn lemons into lemonade with bad unit blocks. Not ferociously bad, but I would say it'd be pretty hard to even find one of those, ferociously bad buildings. For instance, we've got Northern Beaches, there's 110,000 properties there, and there's probably one strata scheme where I would not buy out of those 110,000 total homes. There's only one strata scheme of 12 or 24 that I wouldn't buy in. So it's pretty rare, guys and girls, if you to have an unbuyable building that not even an agent or a buyer would buy in, because we know our shit.
Yeah. Well, that's exactly what Luke's just said as well. You almost need a strata consultant. Lots of buildings I'd buy in, others I wouldn't walk into, but for the most part, as you said, it's only going to be a handful that you wouldn't.
I reckon that's a phenomenal idea, what he's just said.
Strata
I reckon that's a
consultant.
phenomenal idea. Yeah. So you've got a buyer's agent, to look after buyers. You've got a bad strata consultant. So when all shit hits the fan, if you still want to pursue the property and understand it, this strata consultant would have like a building background. and they would go in and revisit and re-look at the books and give you a further consultation. And they may even negotiate the deal further for you because of the strata.
Well, why don't we talk about that a little bit, Mark, where there are issues in a strata block, but you still want to buy the unit, but you know that there are funds to be spent in the future. What can you do as a buyer to hedge that issue? Are you just going to buy it and then you have to cop the price of the levies on top at your expense afterwards? Or can you go about things like that in a different way?
Well, it's interesting. We've even had cases where owners have rebated money back to the buyer, and the reason why is say the buyer was buying something for $1 million, and say the strata levy was going to be $20,000 on the property. Often a buyer will say, "Look, I want to pay $980," and the owner goes, "Yeah, deal." And sometimes even the buyer says, "Look, I'm going to pay you $1 million, but is it okay for you to pay that 20 grand strata levy on my behalf?" Do you know what I mean? So the actual seller, before they leave the property, last day, for example, they will pay for that big strata levy. And then because if the purchaser only pays $980, where are they going to get that 20 grand from in a year's time or 6 months' time to pay the big strata bill for the big repair? They got to go to the bank and borrow it and ask if they can borrow it. Bank says yes, bank says no. But it's quite a tidy way of doing it.
Yeah, and that's right. And there was one that just settled the other day where, there was potentially up to $3 million worth of works in the building. But when the apartments still sell, there's obviously ways around it, and that's exactly right. In this case, it's a rebate. But you can dance and jump around these things, and you can make it so that it's mutually beneficial for both the seller and the buyer at the same time. Both parties have to feel comfortable. Yeah. Neither party will go ahead if they feel like they're being hard done by. So there's a little bit of synergy that comes together there as well when we're negotiating on their behalves, just to try and help them out.
But James, I do get the emotion though. Like I do get that freaked out. Oh my God, this is a piece of shit. I'm not going to buy it. Throw your hands up in the air. Stuff that. This is my first purchase. I can't afford to go through these emotions. I do get that, and I do get that. Hey Jeff, I do get that we are probably. As a real estate agent, we see it all the time, so we're a bit insensitized. But I think as a buyer, you'd be pretty freaked out.
Yeah. And again, I think this is probably the bottom line that comes out of every conversation we have when we're talking on behalf of others, that you just need to have a good conversation, a good relationship with your agent, and they'll be transparent with you. They'll tell you what to do. They'll tell you the ways that you can get around these things. Strata issues certainly doesn't mean to not move ahead on a property. Which I think is the bottom line. No matter where it's at, you can make it beneficial for everyone.
Yeah, and look, sometimes it's a dead duck. It's just shit. It's a bad building, but I think most times it's workable if you can understand what's wrong with the building. And honestly, now I reckon 1 in 4 buildings, I'm getting something coming up in the strata. Something.
Excuse me. Well, that's it. There's no strata report that reads completely clean, because every building is going through its own phases, its own plan. Hopefully your strata manager has got a nice long-term plan as to what we're doing in terms of maintenance and upkeep and improvements over the course of the future, I suppose. You can't win it all, but yeah, you get around these things for people. And again, at the end of the day, you hear horror stories, but it's usually not. You only hear the bad things. You don't hear the good. Yep,
it's true. And we're dealing with it all the time. I think particularly being in a unit suburb like we are, we're just dealing with all that sort of all the time. DY's got 9,000, 10,000 odd units. So we're just probably a little bit exposed. So it's good to share that with everyone, and everyone knows a little bit about what it's about.
Yeah. And it's the type of thing that if you do have questions, or you have an investment or an apartment that you're living in and there are issues and you don't know who to talk to for advice on what to do with strata, this is happening in the future, reach out to us. We'd love to walk and talk you through it because, you know, we do come across these things every day, like Mark said. So if you're out there listening and you need some advice or you have a couple questions on Strata, feel free to reach out.
Gives call. And the nuggets and takeaways today are don't get too caught up in the hype. There's not many unbuyable strata buildings in New South Wales. The government is behind you. So, you know, but not saying buy them, but I'm just saying they are poisoning a lot of the stratas and good stratas that are out there today. And there's a hell of a lot more. There's you know, it's like 99.99999 are okay to buy. It's just that 0.1, which is a dud. And you can negotiate, guys, if you understand the depth of the problems, and I mean the depth of the problems in that strata, and you are buying, you can actually maybe take advantage a little bit and buy for a little or a lot less, and be better off than buying a perfectly good building. Because that building will come good once it rides through its storm. Our building where our office is failed on fire cladding. It's only a 5-year-old building, and the cladding had to be replaced on some parts of the outside. Builder came back and did it for free. But it was an absolute shit fight the years before that when people were reading the strata.
And that's right. And that sort of goes into a more depthy part of the strata conversation as to what the builder's responsibilities and obligations are, and when repairs, maintenance gets done by the builder. And that's another rabbit hole that scares people. But typically when these buildings are under warranty, the developer or the builder comes back and they fix the jobs. They might not do it straight away because they're trying to do it economically at the same time. But equally, as you say, they come back and they do it. It doesn't mean that every single owner is up for thousands and thousands of dollars immediately, which is the immediate assumption.
Absolutely. But always call us. Thank you for watching, everyone. James, thank you.
Thank you. Have a good day. And yeah, I don't think it works like
Take
this.
care. See ya.